James, I was sitting in my office, flipping through the latest reports, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw Ryan's name. That was strange. He usually shoots me a text first. I picked up, and from the moment he started talking, I could tell something was off. His voice wasn't steady, like he was unsure of what to say. "Ethan, listen, man. I need you to sit down wherever you are." I was already in my chair, my frown growing as I tightened my grip on the phone. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart rate picking up. Ryan took a deep breath. "It's Megan," he said. My stomach immediately twisted. "A club? What's she doing there?" He hesitated again. "Dancing," he said. I almost laughed, the word caught in my throat. "Dancing?" Then his voice dropped. "Serious." She was getting very close to Matthew, and their behavior was borderline inappropriate. It felt like they were putting on a public spectacle, right out in the open. And James is cheering them on. For a moment, I felt everything inside me go cold. James. My mind struggled to process it. Yeah, and Sarah too. Some other friends are here too, watching like it's a show. I didn't want to call, but I figured you'd want to know. I stared at my desk, the pounding in my ears drowning out everything else. This couldn't be real. Megan wouldn't do this. "I'm sending you the address," Ryan said. The Velvet Lounge. A notification popped up on my phone. I barely registered the address before I was grabbing my jacket. "I'll be there." The drive to the Velvet Lounge was a blur. The traffic lights, the turns. Hell, I don't even remember how fast I was going. My head was stuck on Ryan's words. James kept echoing in my mind. He was supposed to be my friend. Our friend. I pulled up to the club, neon lights flashing across my windshield. The bass from the music hit me like a wave as I stepped inside. Ryan was waiting just beyond the entrance, looking as serious as I've ever seen him. He didn't say anything, just nodded toward the dance floor. And that's when I saw her. Megan. She was pressed up against Matthew, the same ex from college, the one who'd left her before I ever came into the picture. His hands were all over her waist, pulling her closer. They moved together like this was something they'd done before, a routine. Then she turned, and I saw it. His lips on hers, his hand gripping the back of her neck. And she didn't pull away. Around them, James and Sarah were laughing, clapping like it was some kind of show. A few other friends of ours were there too, all grinning and whispering to each other. Something inside me snapped. I didn't even realize I'd moved until I was standing right in front of them. Megan looked at me, her movements slow, almost lazy, like she wasn't in a hurry. When she saw me, there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but it was gone almost immediately. Instead of guilt, she smiled. "Oh, Ethan," she said. I raised a hand, cutting her off before she could give me whatever excuse I knew was coming. My voice was steady, too steady. "No, you're not sorry. So save it. I'll give you time to be sorry." Her smile faltered, but I wasn't done yet. I turned to look at James and Sarah. Just moments ago, they were laughing, cheering her on like this was some kind of performance. Now, they looked a lot less amused. I took a step toward them, my voice unwavering. "I saw you both clapping while that man kissed my soon-to-be ex-wife. That makes you my enemy from now on. So you'd better watch yourselves." James's smirk dropped, and Sarah couldn't even look at me. Good. They should feel uncomfortable. Then I turned back to Megan. "How long has this been going on?" She lowered her head, her fingers toying with the strap of her dress. For a brief second, she looked like she might feel ashamed. But then she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "For months. Ever since he came back." I stood there, my jaw tightening, the words sinking in. I was with him. For months. I repeated, the weight of it all crushing me. She'd been coming home to me every night, lying next to me in bed, pretending, knowing what she was doing behind my back. Then she lifted her chin and locked eyes with me, her face hardening. "I was going to tell you. I want a divorce," she said. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "No need to bother. You'll get everything you deserve, Megan. I promise you that." Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but I wasn't done yet. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "But listen to me closely. You do not step foot in my house. Not for your things. Not for closure. Not for anything." I paused, my words hanging in the air. "If you do, there will be a lot more for you to deal with." A shift beside her caught my attention, and I turned just as Matthew stepped forward, stiff and squared up. He was trying to look tough, but I could tell from his posture that he was unsure. "Are you threatening her?" His voice was strong, but I could hear the edge of doubt beneath it. I locked eyes with him, stepping into his space, my gaze steady. Yes, I am. I'm telling her to stay the hell away from my house. If she doesn't, I will invoke the castle doctrine on her. For a split second, Matthew's expression flickered. First recognition, then caution. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He wasn't dumb enough to take it further. The pounding music from the club seemed to fade into the background as an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I let my words settle before I stepped back. Without another look at Megan, James, or any of the others who had watched this unfold, I turned and walked out. The cold night air hit me immediately as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to cool the fury raging inside me. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. The phone rang once before a deep voice answered. Christopher Lemus speaking. I took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel as I slid into my car. Chris, it's me. Aaron, I need your expertise. My wife, Megan, wants a divorce, and I want to make sure she regrets ever wanting one. A slow, almost amused chuckle came through the receiver. Well, you called the right guy. And he was right. No one around here was as ruthless as Chris. He listened carefully as I laid it all out. No interruptions. When I finished, I heard his low chuckle again. You've already got it all figured out. I like that. I leaned back in my seat, gripping the wheel. The house is mine. I bought it before we got married, so she can't touch it. The business? It's my father's. On paper, I'm just an employee, so that's out of her reach too. Chris hummed in approval. Smart move. Now, the joint accounts, I said, smirking. Already handled. Stopped by the bank on my way home. Took everything out. You know she's going to fight for alimony, right? She can fight all she wants. I'll give her exactly what the judge says I have to. Nothing more, nothing less. But she won't see a single cent until that's official. Chris chuckled again, his voice dripping with amusement. Damn, Ethan, you're colder than I remember. I didn't respond. I was done being the nice guy. After hanging up, I drove home. The house felt different now, like a battlefield I'd just reclaimed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, then pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a while. Daniel picked up on the second ring. Well, if it isn't the old devil himself, he said, his voice full of a grin. I smirked. Got a job for you and the boys. Can you be here in 25? There was a brief pause, followed by a short laugh. Sounds interesting. We're on our way. Exactly 29 minutes later, Daniel pulled up with his crew, a solid group of men I'd served with in the Marines. Men who understood loyalty, respect, and, most importantly, revenge. Daniel stepped out first, cracking his knuckles. All right, what's the mission? I nodded toward the house. Everything that belongs to Megan. Pack it up, dump it outside, and get it out of my sight. But I want it done with extra care, I added. Carlos, always the first to catch on, grinned. You want us to leave a message? I nodded again. Every single piece of her clothing. Before you fold it, I want to see the imprint of your boots on it. Daniel chuckled. Damn, cold. I watched them get to work immediately, and I have to admit, there was something oddly satisfying about the whole thing. The house filled with the sounds of cabinets opening and slamming shut, drawers being torn open, and heavy boots stomping down on fabric. The feeling I had while watching it unfold was something I couldn't quite describe. It was like a weight lifting, but also sinking in at the same time. Carlos held up Megan's wedding dress, stretching it out between his fingers. This one's getting special treatment, he said with a grin. I crossed my arms and watched him. Yeah, make sure it stinks. He grinned wider, took a long swig of his chew, and with a deep breath, let out a slow spit directly onto the white fabric. The thick, dark stain spread across the lace like a mark of disgrace. Then, with a sly smirk, he unzipped his pants. Might as well add a little extra, he muttered. I watched him, no words needed, as he did his part, his contribution soaking into the expensive material. Once he was finished, he wrapped the dress up and shoved it to the bottom of the pile with everything else. Perfect, I muttered under my breath, a grin creeping across my face. Let it stink. Just as I was letting the moment sink in, a knock echoed from the front door. I already knew who it was. I took a deep breath before opening it. There stood Sophia, Megan's mother, her face full of concern. Behind her were James and Sarah, hanging back like stray dogs, lurking in the background. I didn't even let them take a step forward before cutting them off. I pointed to the neatly stacked boxes on the porch, starting to show the signs of being left out in the elements. Before you make it to your car, pick up those boxes. You're a traitor. If not, I'll let nature claim them. James opened his mouth like he was going to argue, but I didn't even flinch. I just stared at him, waiting for him to think better of it. He did. Sarah grabbed his arm, and the three of them turned, hauling the boxes away without another word. I stepped aside and let Sophia into the house. She looked around the place, the home where her daughter had once lived, now stripped bare. She sighed, her face a mixture of sorrow and something else. Regret? Disappointment? When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. Before I say anything, I just want to be clear, what Megan did was wrong. There's no excuse for it, no justifying it. She wrung her hands as she spoke. I'm not here to defend her. I crossed my arms, staying silent, waiting for her to continue. I just came to tell you that. She loves him, and she loves you too. She finished, her voice quieter now. That was when I had to stop her. I let out a short, humorless laugh. If she ever loved me, she wouldn't have gone back to the man who abandoned her. Sophia flinched at my words, but I didn't stop. 5 years of marriage, and I find out I was just a placeholder. I was the safe choice while she waited for the man from her past to come back. And now that he's back, I'm useless. I'm disposable. Sophia sniffed, wiping at the corner of her eye with her sleeve. I know how you feel, Aaron, she said quietly, but I just can't make her understand. I shook my head. There's no need for that. I don't want her back. She's made her choice. If she wants out, fine, but I'll make sure she gets what's coming to her. Her expression shifted slightly, fear creeping into her features. You're not going to hurt her, are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I told him clearly that he should stay away from my family and my property. If he didn't, he'd regret it. Let her stay away from me, and I'll stay away from her. Sophia let out a soft exhale, clearly relieved. But I wasn't done yet. But the 5 years she wasted? I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping lower. I will get retribution. Not just on her, but on the backstabbers who used to call themselves my friends. Her face fell, her eyes filling with worry as she looked away. She gathered herself before whispering, This is exactly what I was afraid of. I softened, just a little. I reached out and hugged her, feeling her fragile form shake slightly in my arms. I'm sorry, I murmured, but your daughter is going to pay. When I pulled back, she wiped a tear from her eye. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. It was a small, broken smile. I can't undo what she's done, Aaron, but you'll always be like a son to me. I didn't know what to say for a moment. Then I managed a small nod. Thanks. Sophia took a long, steady breath, straightened herself up, and walked toward the door. She stepped outside, leaving behind the quiet stillness of the house. At her own place, she sat in the living room, the dim light from a nearby lamp casting long shadows on the walls. A cold cup of tea sat untouched on the table beside her, long forgotten. She'd spent the entire evening replaying her conversation with Aaron in her mind, trying to make sense of everything. Then the front door creaked open. Megan stepped in, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, the sound confident and defiant. Behind her, Matthew followed, his smug expression like he'd already won the battle. They looked completely unfazed, almost too comfortable given the destruction they'd left in their wake. Sophia slowly lifted her tired eyes to them as they stepped inside. She exhaled, her mind working through how to approach this. Dear daughter, she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. I can't even begin to explain the damage you've caused. Megan rolled her eyes, plopping down on the couch and kicking off her heels with a dismissive gesture. Oh, come on, Mom. He'll get over it. Aaron's always been the strong, silent type. He'll just pick up the pieces and move on. Sophia's gaze hardened. Move on, she repeated, her voice quiet but sharp. Megan smirked, stretching out and leaning back. I've already spoken to a lawyer. We'll have him served by next week. Matthew, ever the smug companion, draped an arm around Megan's shoulders. That's right. Megan gets the house and half of his business. Sophia remained still, her expression unreadable as she watched them. Megan ran her fingers through her hair, clearly pleased with herself. Zach and I are going to live in the house. We're making it ours. Matthew nodded eagerly. And once we get the business, we'll sell it. The money will be more than enough for us to start fresh. We've already talked about opening our own business, just like we planned in college. Megan looked at him with a dreamy expression. It's going to be perfect, babe. Sophia watched them in silence for a long moment, processing everything they had said. Then, suddenly, she let out a laugh. It wasn't a laugh of amusement, nor joy. It was something colder, darker, something that made Matthew's smirk falter for just a moment. Sophia shook her head, her eyes piercing as she looked at them. The best laid schemes, O mice and men, she began, her voice deliberate, heavy with meaning. Gang aft eagerly, and lay us not but grief and pain, for promised joy. Megan frowned, confused. What? Sophia leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving them. Have you ever heard that poem by Robert Burns? Megan looked at Matthew, who shrugged. No. Sophia nodded knowingly. That's all right. You'll see it for yourselves soon enough. With those words, she stood up, smoothing out her dress. But for now, enjoy what you think you've won. Then she walked out. 2 days later, Ethan sat parked outside Megan's office, sipping his coffee as the day began to unfold. The sun was just beginning to rise, but everything was falling into place exactly as planned. He glanced at his watch, any moment now. Inside the building, a man in a dark suit stepped through the glass doors and walked toward the front desk. Ethan knew him well. Tom, the process server he'd hired. Tom was reliable, efficient, and when the situation called for it, he had a flair for the dramatic. A few minutes later, Ethan saw him enter Megan's office. He leaned back in his seat, letting the moment sink in. Though Ethan wasn't there to see her reaction when she received the envelope, he could picture it vividly. The confusion as she saw it, followed by the quick realization, then the panic setting in. He could almost hear her heart rate speeding up as she read the words. Grounds for divorce, adultery. Tom would have smiled at her politely, just like he always did. Are you Mrs. Megan Peterson? She would have nodded, probably distracted, thinking it was just some routine paperwork. Then, with that same polite smile, he would have handed her the envelope. Have a nice day, he'd say, and Ethan could practically hear the silence that followed. In a small town like theirs, scandals didn't stay quiet for long. Inside that envelope weren't just divorce papers, they were photos. Crystal clear pictures of Megan and Matthew, locked in each other's arms, right at the club. No room for excuses. No way to deny it. Ethan tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, watching Megan hurry to her boss's office. Right on time. Lucas was an old friend, someone who had known Megan almost as long as Ethan had. But unlike him, Lucas had never fallen for her charms. In fact, he had warned Ethan years ago to be careful with her. Ethan had brushed it off at the time. Need the day off? Lucas asked, his grin wide, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Megan must have nodded, too stunned to say anything. Fine, he said, still grinning. A moment later, she stumbled out of his office, her face pale, her steps unsteady. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket just as it rang. It was Lucas. He answered, already knowing what Lucas would say. It's done. She's heading home. I couldn't help but smile as I watched Megan's figure disappear into the parking lot. Exactly as I planned, I thought. Lucas's voice came through on the other end of the line, his chuckle low and knowing. I got you, buddy. Count on me. I pulled into the parking lot of a small, cozy cafe, a place with old wooden booths and the warm scent of fresh pastries filling the air. I needed something sweet to go with my victory. Walking up to the counter, I ordered a donut and a black coffee, then found a spot by the window. The place hummed with a quiet peace. Outside, the world moved on, oblivious to what had just unfolded. People went about their lives, laughing, living, enjoying their day. But in another part of town, Megan's life was unraveling. I took a slow bite of my donut, savoring the sweetness, when my phone vibrated on the table. I glanced at the screen. Megan. I smirked. Right on cue. I lifted the phone to my ear. Before I could even greet her, her voice blasted through, full of fury. You're a traitor, she snarled. You're trying to ruin me. I stirred my coffee casually, completely unfazed. Good morning to you too, Megan. Cut the crap, Ethan. I just looked through the divorce papers. There's no mention of the house. No mention of the business. Where's my half? I took another sip of coffee, letting the moment stretch out before responding with the calmest voice I could muster. Your half went down the drain the second you decided to open your legs for someone else. There was a pause, just long enough for the silence to hang heavy between us. Then came the outraged gasp. "You chose the wrong side," she hissed. I leaned back in my seat, watching a couple outside stroll by, laughing. Loyalty really is a beautiful thing, I thought. "If you want anything," I continued, my voice smooth, "talk to your lover. Maybe he can buy you that dream house you were planning to steal from me." Her breath grew ragged now, the anger practically crackling through the phone. I decided to twist the knife a little deeper. "And just so we're clear," I added, "there's a restraining order against you and your little boyfriend. Don't ever come near my house or my business." I heard her inhale sharply, no doubt gearing up for another round of shouting, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. Click. I ended the call and set the phone down on the table, taking another bite of my donut. It was perfect, still fresh. A deep sense of satisfaction settled over me. One battle won, but the war wasn't over yet. Now, it was time for James and Sarah to feel the consequences of their little betrayal. Before we dive into that, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Ethan Peterson. I served in the Marines for 5 years, did a tour in Afghanistan, was stationed in Saudi Arabia for a while, and eventually retired. I came back home to run my father's business, a small but crucial tech solutions. We weren't a giant corporation, but in a town like ours, we didn't need to be. We were the backbone of every business here. Data management, IT hardware, networking support. If a business had computers, they needed us. That included James and Sarah. James ran an Ironworks Ltd., and Sarah owned an accounting firm. Both of them had eagerly thrown in their lot with Megan and her lover, drinking and laughing at that club like my marriage was a joke. They chose sides that night, and now they would pay for it. The irony? It was almost too perfect. Both of their IT contracts had expired 3 weeks ago. I had known this moment was coming, so I didn't bother renewing them. I let them think everything was fine. Let them keep using our cloud services, our leased equipment, our support. They never realized their entire infrastructure was hanging by a thread. And now, that thread was about to snap. I went back to my office, fired up my laptop, and sat back in my chair. I watched the client contract dashboard on the screen. James's contract had expired. Sarah's too. Their businesses had no idea that at any moment, their data could be wiped clean, their systems could go dark. No backups, no redundancies. If I flipped the switch, they'd be thrown back into the Stone Age, working with paper, scrambling for anything they could salvage. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Time to set things in motion. I grabbed my phone and dialed Kevin, my client manager. He picked up on the second ring. "Ethan, what's up?" he asked, sounding casual. "I need you to do something for me," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Send formal emails to James and Sarah. Let them know their contracts have expired, and they have exactly 3 days to back up their data. On the 3rd day, we wipe everything clean and take back our leased equipment." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then Kevin chuckled. "Damn, you're not messing around, huh?" "Not anymore," I replied. I could hear Kevin typing away on his keyboard. "All right, I'll draft something up. Are we keeping it professional, or do you want to make this a bit more personal?" I smirked. "Professional, but make sure they know they're on their own now. No renewal options." Kevin whistled through the phone. "Got it. They're going to lose their minds when they realize they ignored all the renewal reminders." I nodded to myself. Exactly. They thought I'd just roll over and extend their contracts because we were friends. That friendship ended the moment they sided with Megan. I added, my voice growing a little colder. Kevin chuckled. "You know what's funny? We've been sending them multiple renewal reminders over the last few months. They ignored them or let them get lost in their spam folders." I replied, the sarcasm evident in my voice. "Yeah, they probably figured I'd automatically renew their contracts, like I owe them something." "Well," Kevin said, "they're in for a wake-up call. Should I add something about how many reminders they ignored?" I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Definitely. Make it clear this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had plenty of time to take action, and they chose not to." Kevin hummed, thinking for a moment. "You think they'll come crawling back, begging for an extension?" I chuckled darkly. "Oh, they will. And when they do, I'll make sure they know exactly why they're in this mess. They picked the wrong side." The morning of the 3rd day rolled around just as expected. My phone started buzzing, with James's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring a few times, then answered, leaning back in my chair with a small smirk. The second I picked up, James's voice hit me like a freight train. "Ethan, What the hell is going on? Why have your people taken our computers? Where are our laptops? How the hell am I supposed to access my data? You can't do this. We had a deal. I held the phone away from my ear, letting him go off like a madman. I could almost picture him pacing frantically, sweat probably dripping down his face as he ranted. When he finally ran out of steam, I spoke, keeping my tone cool and controlled. What contract, James? I don't remember signing anything recently. What the hell are you talking about? He spat. Our contract expired weeks ago. There was no renewal. I let the silence stretch between us for a moment before continuing. My team sent you multiple reminders, which you ignored. So now, I'm doing the same thing to you. And with that, I hung up. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was Sarah. I sighed, already knowing how this conversation was going to unfold. I answered. Ethan, are you really going to do this? She asked, her voice thick with panic. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I turned my attention to the monitor in front of me. Sarah's data was all lined up, ready for the command. I hovered my finger over the keyboard, then pressed enter. I watched the files start to vanish. Once they were gone, I brought the phone back to my ear. Hold on, Sarah, I said casually, enjoying the moment. I waited just a little longer, watching the last of the data disappear. Well, I just did, I said coolly. The shriek on the other end nearly made me laugh. What have you done? She screamed. All the data is gone. My clients are going to kill me. I smiled. Then explained to them how you ignored the contract renewal with your IT service provider, and how he legally wiped all your data. I paused for dramatic effect before adding, have a nice day, Sarah. And with that, I hung up. With James and Sarah out of the way, I could focus on Megan and Zach. But I knew I had to wait for the right moment. The divorce had to be finalized first. Megan tried to fight the terms in court, with her lawyer making weak attempts to paint her as the victim. She wanted the house. She wanted a share of my business. She wanted what she felt entitled to. Too bad for her, my lawyer was better. Your Honor, my lawyer began. We'd like to establish that the house in question is not a marital asset. It was purchased by my client before he even got married, and it remains solely in his name. Megan's lawyer fidgeted nervously, while Megan clenched her jaw in frustration. The judge nodded, considering the argument. Does the petitioner's counsel have any evidence to refute this? The judge asked, his voice calm but firm. Her lawyer sighed. No, Your Honor. Strike one. Then they tried to argue that, since I owned a thriving IT business, Megan was entitled to half. That was when things got interesting. My lawyer stood up, adjusting his suit, and turned to the judge with a confident smile. Your Honor, my client does not own a business. He is simply an employee at his father's tech solutions. The judge turned his gaze to me. Mr. Peterson, can you confirm your income? I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I receive a salary of just over $1,200 per month. Megan whipped her head around to look at me, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. I kept my face neutral. My client would like to submit his pay stubs for the last year as evidence, my lawyer said, handing the neatly organized documents to the judge. As you can see, his income is significantly lower than the petitioner's. In fact, he continued, Ms. Peterson earns more than he does. The judge glanced at the paperwork, then at Megan. Ms. Peterson, based on this information, I find no grounds for your claim to any share of Mr. Peterson's income or assets. Strike three. And then came the best part. Furthermore, my lawyer said, flipping through another document, given that my client earns substantially less than the petitioner, and considering that the dissolution of this marriage was caused by your infidelity, we are requesting spousal support to be awarded to Mr. Peterson. Megan's eyes nearly popped out of her head. She shot to her feet. What? She shouted. The judge banged his gavel. Order in the court. Megan's lawyer scrambled to speak. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The judge cut him off, his voice steady and commanding. Ms. Peterson, given that your husband is the lower-earning spouse and that your infidelity caused the dissolution of this marriage, I am awarding Mr. Peterson's spousal support in the amount of $600 per month for a period of 3 years or until he remarries, whichever comes first. Megan's face turned crimson. Her fists clenched at her sides. She looked like she wanted to scream, but in court, she was powerless. Strike three. I barely held back my smile as we left the courtroom. Megan stormed up to me, fury radiating from her. You set this up? You manipulated everything. She spat. I shrugged nonchalantly. No, Megan. I just let the truth speak for itself. She gritted her teeth, eyes full of rage. You think you won? I couldn't help but chuckle. Oh, I know I did. Then I walked away, already thinking about my next move. I knew one thing for sure. I was going to take those 3 years of support and enjoy every minute of it. For months later, the divorce decree arrived. I was officially free. But now came the final step. As soon as I left the courthouse, I called Lucas, Megan's boss. He picked up with a light tone in his voice. Guess it's time, he said. I smiled. Yep, finally free. So, drinks on you tonight? Lucas asked, joking. I grinned. Nah, I've got a small dinner with Mr. Benjamin Peterson. He laughed. Your uncle was the judge? Hell, man, you knew from the start Megan was screwed. I smirked. Never give your enemies a chance to fight back. You know who her lawyer was? Lucas asked. Who? It was George, he said. Old George. I replied. Yep, Lucas said with a laugh. I knew you were going to screw her over hard. Old George is my uncle from my mother's side. Small town, you know, I said with a grin. Lucas laughed. Well, drinks are on me tomorrow night. I promise. I smirked again. I'm just preparing the paperwork for Megan. She'll be out by tomorrow evening. As for Matthew, I spoke to Mr. Patel, and he's livid after hearing his employee was sleeping with a married woman. By tonight, I continued, Matthew will be fired. No recommendation. I thanked Lucas and hung up. A week passed. On a quiet Wednesday evening, I heard a knock at my door. I opened it to find Sophia. Standing there, her expression unreadable. Hey, Ethan, she said softly. Hey, Sophia. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let her in. She sat down on the couch, smoothing out her skirt as she looked at me with a small, nervous smile. I'm not sure how to say this, but Megan is a mess. I sat down across from her, leaning back in my chair. Yeah, I said, a smirk creeping up on my lips. Sophia nodded. She's planning to leave town. I let out a small chuckle. Well, that's not surprising, I said. She burned every bridge with everyone in town. Sophia tilted her head slightly, a small, knowing smile on her lips. No, Ethan. She didn't just burn bridges. She crossed the wrong one. I met her gaze, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I exhaled slowly. I'm not sorry for what I did. Sophia shook her head. You don't have to be. She deserved it. She took you for granted and destroyed your marriage. I nodded. She did. Sophia leaned forward, her voice softening as she spoke again. James and Sarah are getting divorced. I raised an eyebrow. Really? She nodded. They're blaming each other for the mess. Their business is on the brink of collapse. Clients have sued them for millions. I let out a low whistle. Millions they don't have. Sophia smirked. Exactly. I leaned back, crossing my arms. They got what they deserved. Sophia hesitated for a moment before speaking again. And Zach? I tilted my head. What about him? Sophia sighed. He already left town. I wasn't surprised. That coward was bound to run sooner or later. 2 days ago, he had a big fight with Megan, Sophia continued. It got really ugly. I looked at her, waiting for more. He even slapped her, she added. But I didn't do anything. I just stood there and watched. A cold shiver ran down my spine. How ironic it was. How a woman once cherished by someone who truly loved her was now being mistreated by the man she'd chosen over him. I exhaled slowly. Well, that's the consequence of her choices. Sophia studied me for a moment, then stood up. I should go home now. I stood with her. Good luck, Sophia. She gave me one last smile. Goodbye, Ethan. And with that, she walked out the door. Life had a strange way of balancing things out. After everything that had happened, I found myself with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. No baggage weighing me down, no toxic relationships to drag me down. My house was quiet, but not in a lonely way. It was peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, I had time to focus on what truly mattered to me. One of those things? Getting a couple of German shepherds. I'd always wanted dogs, but Megan had never been a fan of the idea. But now that she was gone, I realized I could do whatever I wanted. I picked up 3 pups from a breeder a couple of towns over, a brother and sister. I named them Titan and Luna. Titan was bold, protective, always ready to defend. Luna was the clever one, always thinking before acting. They quickly became my constant companions, following me wherever I went. They slept at the foot of my bed, making sure I was never truly alone. With them around, my morning runs felt better, my house felt livelier, and my mood. Well, let's just say they made me smile more than I had in years. Then came Olivia. I met her at the dog park. Well, Titan and Luna met her first. She was sitting on a bench, sipping coffee, while her own German shepherd, Rex, struggled with a stick twice his size. My dogs ran straight to him, and before I could call them back, they were already in the middle of a tug-of-war. Olivia laughed, shaking her head. Looks like we have a little team here. I smirked. Guess so. Sorry if they're bothering him. She waved it off with a laugh. Are you kidding? This is the most fun he's had all week. We ended up talking for over an hour, watching our dogs play. She had a warm, easygoing presence, smart, funny, confident. Nothing like the mess I'd been tangled up in before. There were no games, no manipulation, just honest conversation and genuine smiles. Meeting her wasn't some earth-shattering event. It was simpler than that. It felt like finding a missing piece of me I didn't even know was gone. One conversation turned into 3. Then came a few texts, a couple of coffee dates. Before I knew it, Olivia and Rex were regulars in my life. We'd go on hikes with the dogs, spend lazy Sundays watching movies, and cook dinner together while the 3 shepherds hovered by the kitchen, hoping for scraps. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was just good. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Olivia leaned against me on the porch, sipping a glass of wine while Titan, Luna, and Rex dozed at our feet. She looked up at me and smiled. You look happy. I thought about it for a moment, then smiled back. For the first time in a long time, I realized I was. I am.